Namaskar, this is Akhilesh Bhargava. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. With Corona continuing to play havoc with the global economy, the IMF has repeatedly pointed out that the world economy has already entered into a recessionary mode and it is expected to be a deep and long recession. Heading this list of nations who have already got into a recession is the United States of America. Experts say that the US has already tumbled into a recession and is falling deep into it. The recent claims for unemployment, for jobless support, which have already surfaced in the US, are to the tune of 26 million persons claiming that they are unemployed and they need dole. This figure is expected to rise even further. The most optimistic prediction for the US for this year is that its economy will contract by 20%. Some even say it would be 40%. All these predictions will be proved to be right or wrong depending on how long does corona continue to impact the economy there. But the reality is that this year the US is going to witness a record fiscal deficit. The receipts of its government is going to be in shortage by its expenditure by about $3.7 trillion. The fiscal deficit is expected to be about 18% of its GDP, which we think is a completely unsustainable situation. What surprises us is that just a few months ago, President Trump used to claim that the US economy is the strongest ever and that it is in a robust shape. And just a couple of months of pain, and it has now got into a recessionary mode. If the US economy is in a trouble, so is the case with China. China's economy is said to have already contracted by 8%. It is also headed to a big time depletion of its GDP. And this is the first time ever since 1976, they say. Yet another large economy like Japan has already contracted, it has shrunk, and it is said to be in a recessionary mode. In any such situation, the demand and supply both contract, and as the demand contracts, as the demand recedes, the supply of course gets adjusted accordingly by the manufacturers. Thus, if the demand for cars fall, of course car manufacturers start producing lesser cars. So would be the case with any other item. But this crisis has upended, has turned upside down the demand and supply equation for every possible product or service. And in some cases, supply is not able to stop even though the demand has receded considerably. And thus we are seeing some very interesting mismatches because of which we are seeing a situation where there is negative pricing taking place. The supplier is willing to part with the product and also wants to give money to the buyer, hoping that he buys the product, he takes the item such that it is beyond the supplier's storage requirements. That is the phenomena of negative pricing. The supplier gives you the goods and also gives you money. This came first to the fore in the case of oil prices. If you look at the global oil statistics, the world produces about 100 million barrels of oil every day. And that is what used to be consumed. Today, the demand has fallen to 70 million barrels of oil every day, and it is falling even further. One would normally say that if the demand for oil has gone down, the supply should also go down, but that's not happening. The oil producers really can't stop the production of oil because doing so would mean closure of oil wells. And a closed oil well becomes less productive. In fact, restarting it is a far bigger challenge. And thus, oil producers, hoping that oil demand will pick up in the near future, continue to produce oil for which there is no demand. Thus, we are in a situation where the supply remains, but the demand keeps falling, and now the producers don't know what to do with the oil. Thus, for May futures of US oil, the situation is you please buy the oil, and the producers will also give you $37.65 per barrel if you contract to buy that oil in the month of May. After all, once the producer produces the oil, he can't even dump it. It's a toxic item and he desperately needs a buyer. While the buyers are vanishing from the market, the storage capacity that is available is also getting full. The total storage capacity of global oil is 4.4 billion barrels of oil, and it is getting filled up at a very fast pace. It is expected by the end of May, the complete global oil storage capacity would have been filled to the full. So while global oil producers continue to produce oil at the established capacity, the demand has been shrinking, and thus oil is in negative territory. Buy the oil and also get paid by the oil producer. The question that comes is, will countries or will India also benefit out of this? The chances are extremely poor for the simple reason that this is a complete supply demand situation. Suppose the demand goes up, then the oil price will also go up to a certain extent, and India can take advantage of this only if it has storage capacity. The total storage capacity of India by virtue of its strategic oil reserves is a mere 15 million barrels of oil. How much is India going to be able to buy and take advantage of this negative oil price situation? The only thing that we are benefiting is to the extent to which we can buy the oil, we are facing a lesser cost of oil. Our current account deficit to that extent goes down. And in case the government chooses to reduce the price of petrol and diesel, to that extent, inflation would dip. Thus, it's a very peculiar situation. Global oil prices in a negative territory, but nobody benefits out of it. The producers will certainly lose money. If we are facing such a glut in the case of oil, where producers can't help but keep producing, so has been the case with electricity. Electricity producers too need to keep their plants running, and thus electricity keeps getting produced. The demand for electricity, the demand for power has gone down. Offices are closed and factories are closed. And we are seeing in Europe that electricity prices too have been in negative territory. In Belgium, on certain days, when the supply of electricity is so much that the producer is in a situation where he doesn't know what to do with it, the producer says that take the electricity and we will also pay you 90 euros per megawatt that you buy. In Germany, the situation is similar. Power producers are paying 87 euros per megawatt if you buy electricity because there is so much surplus. So has been the case with France. And electricity remains in a negative territory. But then, when there is no demand for it, if you don't know what to do with it, how does it benefit you? The producer certainly loses. That's what we are also seeing in the case of money. In Europe, the European Central Bank brought the cost of money into a negative territory. In other words, if the bank lends you money, it also pays you instead of charging you interest, being very happy that you borrowed the money. And that's because the supply of money continues, the demand has fallen. Household savings continue to be robust in Europe, and there are no takers for that money by way of loans. At such a time, who wants to spend extra? Who wants to invest by borrowing? The borrowing going down, supply remaining high, banks are forced to be in negative territory as far as the cost of money is concerned. Again, with nobody borrowing at this negative rate, who benefits really out of it? Banks certainly are facing a loss situation. A similar situation is being witnessed in America in respect of agricultural produce, with restaurants remaining closed, hotel industry suffering, pubs being closed. Farmers are in a situation where the produce is exceeding the demand and they are not harvesting it, they are destroying it. Unlike in the case of oil, where the oil companies cannot just dump the oil on the ground, the farmers at least can destroy the produce by not harvesting it or just destroying it in the fields. They are also witnessing something similar in US in respect of items like meat, etc. But then these items are not difficult to dispose of. Even though the farmer earns a loss, he doesn't need to get into a negative territory pricing. He just doesn't harvest it, he doesn't supply it, he lets it rot in the field. And thus, we are not seeing a negative pricing, but we are seeing a similar situation where the supply is far in excess of the demand and the supply remains for the simple reason it will continue. Something similar is being seen with milk. Cows continue to supply milk. The farmers are bound to destroy it at some point of time. Very curiously, something similar is being witnessed in respect of beer. It is said that in Europe and in America, about 10 million gallons of beer is lying in stadiums in kegs, and they don't know what to do with it. Thus, a very interesting situation because of demand supply equation going haywire. The entire situation has been upended, it has been made upside down. In most cases, suppliers have stopped producing and thus they have stopped supplying, thus matching their production or supply with the demand which is there. But in cases like oil, in cases like power and energy, money, agriculture and beer, the scene is that production goes on, they can't stop it. Unfortunately, the ordinary consumer has not been benefiting out of this. We are certainly not going to see something similar for many decades to come, hopefully. This is Akhilesh Bhargava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.
Now be the first to know about the latest updates on our new news app. Go on your Android or iOS, search for HW News Network. Download our app, choose the language you prefer to get updates in, and be up to date with the latest news.
If you like this video, please share it, and we would love to hear your comments in the comments section down here. Also, please do like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter to get minute-to-minute news updates. For more such shows and videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel.